Hey, good morning, Senator, and good morning to everybody watching. It's Saturday, March 29th, and we are back with another show for you all. Um, Last week, I believe we had discussed sort of the developments going on with the peace talks in Ukraine, as well as what's actually been going on in Syria. Now, I actually heard, Senator, that I think in the last couple of days, the President al-Jilani has been meeting with some Shiite representatives and some diplomats. I don't necessarily know. Some people who have been sort of supportive of al-Jilani are saying this is a positive development. I don't really know what to make of it. And then, of course, there are also the talks that are happening in Riyadh. And, I've heard that those talks actually may not be as productive as some people are hoping them to be. And yet, however, we keep hearing, that the mainstream media is saying these talks aren't productive and such, but yet we see Putin saying only good things about Trump every time that the White House does a readout of the phone calls between them and Putin. And, it's always like, yeah, Russia is looking to make a deal with us here. We're going to work here, here, and here. So it seems like the mainstream media is presenting one thing, but there may actually be something else completely happening. Of course, there was this whole Signalgate scandal that blew up over the week as well. So it's been kind of an exciting week. But Senator, I think I'm going to pass it to you for you to tell us what is it you want to show us today.
Yeah, well, the principal topic for the day will be the domestic struggle, principally domestic, over the legal struggle between the branches of government, and Trump's attempt to restore clear lines of authority between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches of government. But yeah, just to touch real briefly on Syria, I have had some contact with individuals in Europe and so forth with very good information about what's going on in Syria. The al-Jilani group, al-Jilani is the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria. He's now put on a suit, slicked back his hair, changed his name, and says he's a moderate, and then immediately began to launch jihad against the Alawites, people known as the Friends of the Christians, and I've seen many videos of the soldiers of Al-Qaeda, the new Syrian government. They don't call themselves Al-Qaeda anymore, but they're in excellent brand new uniforms, dressed, and they're going down the street and they're just slaughtering people. There are many videos coming out just where at very close range, they beat up, they whip, they harass various people along the streets, and then they just shoot them, and you see them being shot on camera. The terror that's been unleashed. This is an 8th century jihad, just like when Muhammad swept with fire across the Middle East and ultimately into Europe. This is not what we think of as more modern Islam. And in any event, the Alawites are in terror. They've fled to the hills, no food, no nothing. Christians have been helping them, and where they've been detected, the jihadists execute the Christian. There's little doubt that the Christians they're coming for the Christians in time. They're also starting to take on all minorities. The Druze, who tried to make peace with them, are in trouble. They're being killed. And just the other day, I saw where the former Grand Mufti, he's the spiritual leader of Muslims in Syria, Wonderful guy. I met him when I was over there on one of my trips. He very much supported freedom of religion. He, his view was we all worship God, and so we should be together in all of this. He has been arrested. So you have now the moderate Muslims who are being attacked by this Al Qaeda government of Mohammed al Jalani. So that continues to go on. This is a slaughter much more vicious than anything that you saw in the early days of the Nazis, just because there's no force to resist them. So that continues, and we'll provide updates on it as it goes along. On the peace prospects, I think what you're seeing is a great struggle. You have the war hawks who are just intent on blocking President Trump. There are some of the Republicans. Senator Weicker of Mississippi is apparently trying to make things a little bit more difficult for the president where he can. Some of the old war hawks are reemerging. Hillary Clinton is coming back, and you have this what I call a tempest in a teapot, where somehow the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic, which is a deep state organization to the core, somehow he got on a a private conversation with very top government officials regarding an attack on Yemen. Now, I think it's very curious. You could understand some bureaucratic glitch where all of a sudden you have all the media, the New York Times and the Post and Washington Times and so forth, and they all get on. It's very strange to me that you would have one organization, which is a committed deep state organization, one and only one, that ends up on this very confidential communication. But in any event, they're raising the rooftops and they're saying, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible that there's been a glitch." Now, it didn't affect anything operationally, but it's kind of ironic because Hillary Clinton came out and she's just ranting and raving about what a terrible thing that we had this security glitch. And she knows people's memories are very short, but you may recall that she was receiving tons of classified, top secret information on her own servers, her private servers, that she was not authorized to receive them on. And she was then under subpoena, and the subpoena ordered her to maintain those servers and not to remove anything. And she just said, what are they going to do? And so she very thoroughly wiped all information from the computer, and then she laughed about it. She said, "Oh, I cleaned it with soap and water," as though to demonstrate that she felt impervious to the law. So here's this woman who has breached national security, who has incentivized wars all around the world, who was at the core of the Benghazi fiasco, where Americans were slaughtered, including the U.S. ambassador to Libya, all because of a scheme that she had hatched up to overthrow the legitimate government of Libya and destroy the entire country, which she did very effectively. And here she has the gall to sit back and say this little glitch where someone was able to penetrate this very sensitive communication. That's a big deal. But the stuff she did, where she got an ambassador killed, she got all of the rescuers, different ones, killed while they were trying to save him, and then she slaughtered just untold thousands of people in Libya, attacking a friendly country, a country that was loyal and friendly to the United States, murdered leaders and so forth. And this lady has the gall to say that this little gaffe, this little glitch in communications is somehow this earth-shaking big deal. Well, relative, this is not a 10,000th of 1% of what Hillary Clinton did. So give me a break. I don't, the people who listen to this show know better than that. Okay. With that, Jose, are you ready to discuss a little bit about the court fights?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I just wanted to kind of add my own 2 cents here, because there's something else going on, I think, in sort of the whole, in terms of the scandals coming out of the Trump cabinet and Trump administrations, as a way to see. You have to remember that there was a big fight to get Tulsi Gabbard in there, to get Kash Patel approved, RFK approved, and even Hegseth approved, right? And the only person who got through seemingly well was Marco Rubio. And so I think that when you see these controversies and these scandals coming out of the cabinet, you have to remember that they weren't going to, the powers that be, the people who didn't want these people confirmed to begin with, are going to do anything they can to get them out. To create some kind of condition where we might see resignations. Just before we got on the show, I saw that there's going to be some hit piece released on RFK Jr. That he was caught up in some blackmail sex scandal, right? And so you kind of see that with the Signal chat fiasco, and you're realizing, oh no, that the cabinet is actually under attack. It stands whatever you think about Gabbard, whatever you think about Kash Patel, the mistakes they're making, they're not making, the decisions they're making, there is an attempt to influence a resignation out of that cabinet because of the peace talks, for one, and also because of whatever else they may have planned that some people don't want to happen. That's, just my 2 cents. But
it's important for us to recognize that the deep state lives. The deep state is an organic, existing thing. It's suffering a lot of blows as Trump works to disassemble the structure within the executive branch of the government. But keep in mind that there are these globalist organizations that have a long-term strategy. And if you look what's happening with the United Kingdom and with France, they are planning to put troops on the ground in Ukraine if they possibly can, with a view towards keeping a NATO presence right on the border of Russia until the next presidential election, where they hope that they can get a Democrat in, or they can get a globalist Republican. Either one is just as good, and then they can stage some sort of a pretext for kicking off World War III. This is their plan. It's a plan out of the London bankers who make their money on war and bloodshed. And some of the New York bankers do the same thing. And so this struggle will go on. This is not something where President Trump wins the presidency and then suddenly everything is fine and he does his program. Now, the deep state is immensely powerful. Right now, they're sort of on the back foot, but they're hoping to regain their position. Okay, well, let's shift over to the struggle that is going on over the over the separation of powers. There is an immense legal struggle that is underway right now. The founders of the Constitution set it up where the first three articles of the Constitution describe the different branches of government. So obviously, this was the most important thing. The Article 1 talks about Congress and the powers of Congress. Article 2 talks about the executive branch and the powers of the president. Article 3 talks about the Supreme Court and what its authorities are. Now, we have a situation where over many years, when we talk about the deep state, part of the deep state, or at least let's say one of the manifestations of the deep state, is the erosion of executive branch power. The Article 2 of the Constitution says, and it's the very first clause of Article 2, Section 1, and it says, the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. Now, executive power is the power to do things, make things happen, to wage war, collect taxes, prosecute crimes, defend the borders. It's not the power to judge things, because that's the judicial branch. And it's not the power to impose taxes or to appropriate money for projects. Those belong to the legislature. But the executive power gives the president, under the Constitution, gives the president the power to do things, to make things happen. So this is why the most important election that we have in this country is the election for the president of the United States, because you have different factions and different parties, and they each want to implement their policies, and so they do that by electing a president. Now, this vesting clause, which says that the executive power is vested in the president of the United States, it doesn't limit executive power in any way. Its language is blunt, it's direct, and it's unequivocal. And so it's very simple. A child can almost apply it. Nonetheless, though, under pressures by the Congress and the judiciary, they have gradually taken away the power that belongs to the president. And we have an enormous, very well orchestrated campaign by the Trump administration to claw back executive authority that has been lost to some extent to the judiciary, but in this case, largely to the Congress. And the idea is to restore the clear lines of authority that once existed between the branches of government. Now, we've got several areas of legal battles that are underway. In the area of immigration, we see a struggle over birthright citizenship, an uphill battle, but one very, very much worth fighting for. So far, the president has not done real well with the lower courts, but the lower courts often, the way that it works, if you are the Democratic Party or Democratic operatives, you go to Democrat judges, and that's where you start your case. And so that's why we have so many cases where at the lower court level, they have ruled against the president. I wouldn't make too much of that. Uh, Sometimes Republicans do the same thing. They try to start cases where they have a more friendly legal environment. So we've got some 150 cases that are underway right now, and in many of those cases, Trump has lost. You can't make too much of that. Many of them will be won on appeal or when they reach the Supreme Court. Hopefully, the Supreme Court will follow the Constitution. It may surprise a lot of our listeners to discover that the Supreme Court does not necessarily follow the clear text of the U.S. Constitution. But that's a whole different topic, but we won't go into that. But in any event, we have a real problem with this Judge Boasberg, who is he's the chief judge of the District Court for Washington, D.C. Now, what place in America could be more representative than Washington, D.C., which voted, I don't know what, something like 96% Democrat in the presidential election? Washington, D.C. is the most unrepresentative part of America. And yet, because it's the seat of government, it ends up having this enormous influence on the rest of the whole country, which is a shame. It's too bad something couldn't change about that. But in any event, Judge Boasberg, he's in the district court. They supposedly distribute cases at random as they come in. He has gotten 4 out of 4 cases involving the Trump administration, statistically impossible. So it's obvious, the fix is in. In DC, the fix is always in. But in any event, Boasberg has handled the the question of the deportations of the Venezuelan gang members, and he is struggling very much to stop the gang members from being deported back to, actually they're being sent to a jail in El Salvador. And the judge has blocked the further deportations, and that case continues. There are cases over overspending on various programs. It is the position, I think, of the Trump administration that while Congress has the sole and exclusive power to appropriate money, in other words, to open the purse and to make the money available, the spending of the money is an executive function. And the president has the authority to impound funds, which presidents throughout history did until Richard Nixon was badly weakened by Watergate, and then Congress moved in and shifted that and sort of took away the power of presidents to impound money. The impoundment is a constitutional issue of, who has the authority to appropriate, legislative branch, who has the power to spend. Spending is an executive function, should be the executive. It's a question of where the courts will draw the line and whether they'll follow the Constitution or not on impoundment. If they do, then that should sweep away a lot of the problems. One of the big thing, of course, is that the president has completely dismantled USAID, which was a sort of the handmaiden of the Central Intelligence Agency. And so the courts got involved, and when it came to the funding, the the judge made a ruling that I think was misinterpreted by the media. The judge ordered the federal government to resume paying $2 billion for work that was already completed. And I agree with the judge in that case. I think clearly, if the federal government orders work done and the work is performed, then the federal government is obliged to pay for work that has been done and completed. But the judge made it clear that the Trump administration was able to terminate thousands, literally thousands of contracts for future work. He was just saying, hey, look, if you've already gotten performance by your contractor, you got to pay the money that you owe. And that's just good basic contract law. But he has allowed the contracts to be terminated, and in a separate suit by USAID employees, another judge cleared the way for all of the workers to be fired while the lawsuit continues. So I think that Trump is doing well when it comes to dismantling things. I'm a little bit surprised, even with the Department of Education. Of course, the public is so disgusted with the Department of Education because they're the ones who shut down our schools during COVID, even though children are essentially unaffected by COVID. Everybody knows that, and they knew it back then. But we're now graduating students who, instead of having 12 years of education, they'll graduate with 11 years or 10 and a half years. And this will go on for many years. That it'll take a total in all of 12 years for this to work its way through the system. So it was the teachers' unions that were behind closing American schools, and it never should have been done. It was a disastrous decision. At the same time, it was the teachers' union working through Department of Education that have promoted racial hatred and sexual perversion in the schools, and dividing children into oppressed and oppressors. But what 6-year-old child, they don't feel, they may feel a little oppressed by their seatmates, if the seatmates making a face at them or something, but they don't understand these things. And the idea that we would indoctrinate children into hating one another in grade school is a real loser. So in any event, the Trump has done a magnificent job of dismantling the Department of Education. It can't completely do away with it because of congressional law, but it's making good progress. We see lots of lawsuits over the Doge program with Elon Musk. Elon Musk is essentially an outside auditor, and he's going in and he's inspecting these different parts of the federal government, and he's rooting out just stunning levels of corruption. And there's been pushback saying, "Oh, he can't possibly have access to this set of information and that set of information." There's one judge, a Washington judge, who said, "Well, you can't get that information at this point. However, in some cases, the judges are saying you can't do that until they get the proper security clearances and get some basic training to make sure they know what they're doing." So I think Doge is actually proceeding fairly effectively. There's a big struggle over equality and DEI, and Uh, we we do have significant progress being made. The government is returning to a merit-based system, because if you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that's the landmark law that was passed after segregation ended, and it said there'll be no discrimination based on race, sex, national origin, several things. And it didn't say no discrimination against one race or a couple of races. It said there shouldn't be discrimination against any race. And the only way that you can accomplish that is to go to a merit-based system, as the Trump administration has done. And I think that's going to be a very healthy thing. And I think they're going to succeed, because the wording of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is our fundamental law dealing with civil rights, protects all races. And one of the things that has really surprised people is that it protects people from discrimination based on national origin. And the Trump administration has simply said that, okay, so foreigners who come in and then they're naturalized, made citizens, you can't discriminate against them. Yeah, we get it. But how about the people who were born here, their families live here for generations? Don't they have national origin also? Their national origin is American. It's the United States. And Trump is saying that those people also are protected from discrimination based on national origin. And I think it's a tremendous advance in civil rights, long overdue. Now, I just want to take a few minutes here. The issue of the struggle over independent agencies. There are an enormous number of independent agencies that have been established by Congress, and Congress kind of overlooked the Constitution when they set them up. Because what they did is, instead of recognizing that the executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States, they said, well, we'll give a little executive power to independent agencies so that they'll be inoculated, they'll be immune to influences by the executive branch. Remember, the president's the one we elect, president's the one we expect to do things, and yet Congress has said, okay, well, we're going to take these areas out of the president's control. So it doesn't matter how frustrated the American people get, they don't have any business mucking around in business that really is the business of the deep state. So we see this huge struggle now. And President Trump has ignored the way the way that the Congress designed these agencies. What they often did is they would set up a board or a commission, and they would say, these members have a fixed term in office, might be 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and the president has no power to remove them unless they commit a crime or they become incapacitated where they can't function, that kind of thing. Well, the people, you and I, expect the president to get things under control, and yet Congress has said, well, we can't really trust the people to know what to do. We know better, and we're going to insulate them. So So President Trump is clawing back executive authority, and we see this principally by him going out and firing the members of these boards and commissions, and just making a frontal assault on the constitutionality of all of these independent agencies and how they're structured. He's not saying we want to abolish the agencies, the commissions, and the boards. What he's saying is that it's unconstitutional to deny the executive, the chief executive, the president, the authority to replace members of the board. And clearly, the Second Amendment to the Constitution gives the president the authority to fire them. Doesn't mean that the Supreme Court will vote that way, but there's a very good challenge being made. I'm not going to read off the entire list. It'd take us the whole session. But just to give you some idea of these independent agencies that are unaccountable to the president. The Central Intelligence Agency. You wonder why they're part of the deep state? It's because they're independent of the president. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. You ever wonder why they could declare that carbon dioxide, which human beings cannot live without carbon dioxide. All life on the planet would perish without carbon dioxide. Some bureaucrat at EPA said, you know what, let's make it a pollutant. And let's say, we're going to outlaw it. And these are monumental decisions being made by people who have no accountability to the president. They have no accountability to the voters. So there's this disconnect between the voters and the ability to control the government. The EPA, Federal Election Commission. You think we got problems with the election? It's part of the reason. The president doesn't control the Federal Election Commission. Federal Reserve Board. This has long been a thing. Who knows what goes on in the Federal Reserve Board? That's an issue. National Labor Relations Board, Securities and Exchange Commission. The list goes on and on and on. Now, Congress gave those agencies broad executive power. And this is the problem. They gave them the powers, but then they insulated them from presidential oversight and control through these fixed terms. And so who can control them? Well, they're like a government to themselves. They're not accountable to anyone, not to the voters, certainly. Smithsonian Institute is probably the worst single example that I've ever seen. The way that Congress set it up. Guess who is on the board? The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He's exercising executive authority. He's on the board. Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the Vice President, 3 U.S. senators, 3 U.S. representatives. So the legislative branch has more members on the board than the executive branch sometimes. And the Chief Justice is on there. He's the senior member of the board. And then we have nine citizens elected by different or appointed by different presidents. So the Smithsonian Institute, which is an executive branch of government, they jumble executive power incoherently among the judiciary, the Congress, and the executive. And it's kind of a supreme example of the absurdity of the way that our government has developed principally since Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. It appears very likely that the designs are unconstitutional the way that Congress has set them up. There's a 90-year-old landmark Supreme Court decision called Humphrey's Executor versus United States. It was decided back in 1935 when the courts began to think that Franklin Roosevelt had way too much power, and they just sort of ignored what the Constitution said. And they issued a ruling that said the president, in this case, Franklin Roosevelt, could not remove certain officials from agencies. And even though the decision flew in the face of the Constitution, it has withstood challenges over many years. And so we're going to have this struggle going on. And something interesting that just happened is just 2 days ago, Washington Post ran an article saying that an appeals court has permitted Trump's removal of independent agency leaders for now. And there were some of these independent commission people, board and commission people who were removed by Trump in violation of the statute, but not the Constitution. Constitution is higher than statutes. And so there was a district court judge who said, okay, we're going to reinstate these people. And the Court of Appeals for the District Circuit in District of Columbia Circuit Court, they ruled that the government is likely to succeed when it arguments that the law that blocks the president from firing these people is unconstitutional. In other words, they're saying that most likely it's unconstitutional what Congress did when they set up these agencies so that the president didn't have control over them. So the appeals court has allowed the firings to proceed, and the case is on its way to the Supreme Court, and we'll see what happens. But the whole issue is about restoring power to the people and allowing the people of the United States to reassert their will over the deep state and the bureaucratic state that exists, that has shackled them and controlled them and taken away their rights and their liberties for generations. So it's a fight worth fighting. Trump has taken it on in ways that no other president has ever taken this on in our history. And he's going to win some, he's going to lose some, but to the extent that he can return power to the people, I think it's going to be a tremendous thing. So, Jose, that wraps us up for today, I think. And
yes, it does, Senator Black. I want to thank you for doing this. I'm sorry my camera is off, but I want to thank you and thank the audience, and hopefully they'll see us again next week.
We'll look for you then.